So, will Lukashenko invade Ukraine? I think if he does, he's fucked.
Walk a delicate tightrope.
I don't know, man.
While he's a close ally of Putin, who has apparently pressured him into joining the conflict, he knows there isn't popular support amongst Belarusians for an invasion of Ukraine. And then
I've heard some rumors that Lukashenko is very scared of a revolution in his country. He's really defending himself in Minsk with a lot of soldiers and police, because he's fearing that the public is going to rise up against him.
The attempt to mobilize would threaten his grip on power. However, earlier this week, Lukashenko announced the formation of a joint regional grouping of forces, or RGF, between Belarusian and Russian troops, sparking some anxiety in Kiev about the possibility.
I feel if that really happens, man, the West has to intervene. At some point, man, we cannot look away as these tyrants are fucking up Ukraine, man. If they fucking do this, man,
of a second
there has to be a harsh reaction.
North. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at what Lukashenko's attitude to Ukraine has been
is 31 years in power,
why he refused to actually send in troops, and whether this is really about to change.
It's a very interesting development, man.
If you like our videos, then
I also saw an article this morning that said Zelensky admits the mobilized reinforcements of Russia are putting pressure on the Ukrainian forces. Poland could beat Belarus alone? Probably. I hope so. Fucking Poland, man. The true carries right now.
Currently, 70% of you haven't made the jump. So
70% not subscribed. I think on my channel, about 7% of you guys are not subscribed. And that is ridiculous. What the fuck's wrong with you?
This story in Ukraine has been moving so fast lately that we've had to make a number of videos about it in the last couple of weeks. So make sure you stick around on TLDR EU so you don't miss any of the latest developments. And
Zelensky kind of looks like a Chad. I don't know. He's that good looking. He looks good. The way he made the decision to dress up in green like army, he works out. He's a good looking dude, man. In a good looking contest, I think he will beat Putin pretty hard, man.
It really helps
no
us
Botox
out,
in that
and
face.
we really appreciate your support. So before we get into the most recent developments, a bit of context. In the last couple of years, Russia and Belarus have become
You're also stressed out as fuck. You look way better. Dude, imagine you have to lead a country in a war and people want to assassinate you every fucking day, man. Dude, I'm stressed with a baby. How stressed must he feel? Jeez. I don't see anyone leaving, though.
This really
1,000
people
need
after
to leave.
Belarus's presidential election in 2020, which didn't go down well with the rest of Europe.
As a German citizen, are you not worried about the winter without Russian gas? There's still enough gas. You can still fucking heat yourself. It's like, what do you think? What's going to happen? Also, if I have to push my heater to 1 instead of 4 and 5 to help innocent people in Ukraine, then fuck yeah, I'm going to fucking do that.
Over his reign, Lukashenko has become ever more authoritarian. And every election since 1994 has been considered by international monitors to be neither free nor fair. This one was no different.
Why is the West not
Official
doing anything in
results claimed
1994?
that Lukashenko had implausibly won a massive 80% of the total vote, while the main opposition candidate, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, had won just 10%.
He looks like Slavic Dr.
And the
Phil.
election was marred by reports of state-sanctioned violence and election fraud. The result of this election led to widespread protests.
There's so many
across
protests
Belarus,
in Belarus all the time,
and
but they always get
violent
beaten
crackdown
down.
by security forces involving the detainment of some 7,000
Downloading right now, dude. There's a massive queue, man. You're probably
in response, many countries, including the EU, refused to recognise the election results.
As they should,
and some,
exactly.
including the EU, UK, US, Canada, and Switzerland, imposed sanctions on Belarus. These sanctions put a massive strain on Belarus's economy. But luckily for Lukashenko, Putin was there to help, providing a source of imports and a $1.5 billion loan to tide him over. Russia was already by far and away its largest trading partner pre-sanctions. But in the last couple of years, Belarus has become even more reliant on Russia.
Look at this Muppet. There's so much Botox, man. The hands are also so awkward. It's like this really awkward. Look at that thumb. I know, man. He just speaks awkward to me, man.
Dependence. Anyway, in November of last year, relations hit a new high as Lukashenko and Putin signed off on 28 so-called Union State programs, which aimed to deepen Russo-Belarusian cooperation and eventually facilitate a political union between the two countries.
Maybe that's 28 blowjobs.
Yep, you heard that right. Putin. Russia and Belarus are eventually planning on becoming one country. This idea first popped up in 1999.
Putin is playing real-life map painting. He wants to literally play HOI4. He just wants to paint the map and make his country bigger. And I feel like in 2022, you can't do that so much anymore.
Eventual aim of creating a single, quote, union state. but it basically fell away in the 2000s after Lukashenko decided he didn't want any part of it. In the last couple of years, however, as relations have improved, Lukashenko has shown a renewed interest in the project. Now, we should say here that relations between the two countries aren't perfect, and a political union is still a long way off. There were originally 35 union state programs, and many of the 28 that remain are just vague promises, saying the two...
Always so, in my opinion, egoistical and stupid by these dictators, man. Imagine Lukashenko well, he couldn't do that. He will start approaching the EU. Here's a fact of life. I remember having this in law school, man. The EU is so fucking good for you, like Turkey and the Balkan and Belarus. Why? Because even if you're not a member of the European Union, but you just talked about of becoming a possible member, you already get money out of the EU pool. For example, Turkey gets that. You get billions of dollars, so you can build up your country more Western, so you can slowly become more EU-like and join the EU. And imagine how countries like Belarus could benefit and grow and get so much prosperity, man, if they will go this way, right? But the problem is you need to fulfill certain attributes, for example, democratic elections.
Plus, the two sides are sufficiently close that many analysts expect Belarus to somehow lend a hand in the invasion.
Do you guys fucking hate this shit? Every day I open my phone and the fucking articles, the headlines, the expert says, military expert says, former German expert says, everybody's a fucking expert. And then you fucking look at it, 80% of the time they're all fucking wrong. Sometimes they're right. Oh my god, I'm also sometimes right if I flip a fucking coin, I don't. But everybody's a fucking expert now.
And there were credible reports back in February that Belarusian air and ground forces would support...
Okay, the EU gives money to Turkey so they keep refugees there, not so that they improve their democracy. Super wrong, completely wrong. That is, you actually know nothing about anything. When I was still educated and still had an IQ and went to law school, we talked about this, and what you're saying is completely retarded. The money the EU gives to Erdogan's Turkey for the refugee crisis is a total different deal than the build-up money Turkey gets anyway, because they are in the pre-member status of the EU, which is a normal status that also gets billions of dollars. These two things are completely separate, Sorfa, man, and you're just saying random shit without knowing anything.
Russia's assault
at least you're good at Counter-Strike, though.
Lukashenko also held a rigged referendum enabling Russia to station nukes on Belarusian territory on the same day that Putin put Russia's nuclear forces on high alert, suggesting a degree of military cooperation between the two. In the end, however, Belarusian forces didn't help with the assault on Kiev, with reports from Ukrainian intelligence claiming...
You would also think that inside the Belarusian army there's a lot of people against this. Like, why do you want to die in Ukraine for nothing, I don't, for Vladimir Putin, I don't.
Claiming that senior figures in the Belarusian military told Lukashenko that they refused to participate in any attack. Since then, this pattern has recurred. Lukashenko has talked a big game and helped out with logistics, but refrained from actually sending troops. However, in the last couple of days, Lukashenko has apparently upped the ante. After Russia used Belarusian bases to launch those Shahed drones...
I think what's happening behind the scenes, we just don't know that, is that Putin and Russia is putting some mad fucking pressure on Lukashenko
gave
man.
A furious press conference
where
he seemed to claim that both Ukraine and Poland were getting ready to attack Belarus. Lukashenko then promptly announced that Belarus and Russia would be forming a joint regional grouping of forces, or RGF, which sparked...
It would be so weird for me, though, if Poland ever has to go to war in there, man, because that's our neighbors, man. Poland is our neighbors. That's when the shit gets actually really, really hot.
Some speculation that Belarus was finally about to join in.
And I feel like if it goes that far that Poland is involved, man, Germany has to start
take these warnings
genuinely
seriously.
fucking going in, man.
In a video call on Tuesday, Zelensky warned G7 leaders that Putin was pressurizing Lukashenko, and Ukrainian officials told the Financial Times that they were so worried about a Belarusian invasion that they'd redeployed troops to north around Kiev in anticipation. So, is a Belarusian invasion
They have to put division north. Their front line is getting weaker.
History suggests
this is all before stuff, man.
Lukashenko has pulled similar stunts in the past. In February, Belarusian troops lined up on the Ukrainian border. In March, Lukashenko said his country would, quote, need to respond to what he described as Ukrainian provocations. And in July,
does anyone still believe this?
Deployed...
Can you believe that there's adult human beings on this planet that believe the rhetoric of Vladimir Putin and Lukashenko? Adult human beings, man, that are allowed to vote.
Border after claiming that Ukraine had fired missiles at Belarusian military posts and that NATO was planning to annex Belarusian border territories. Nonetheless, despite these recurrent threats, Lukashenko never actually does anything.
HOI4 roleplay games.
This is largely because Belarusians just don't support Putin's invasion. There were large anti-war protests after the referendum that allowed Putin to station nukes in Belarus, and polling by Belarusian political opposition found that only 13% of Belarusians support the Russian campaign.
Wow, I never thought that is that low. 13%, that is crazy, man.
And only 12% believe that Belarus should send soldiers. Now, this polling should be taken with a massive pinch of salt.
Peasants
but
from
public
the sewers
discontent
or some shit.
with Putin's invasion in other post-Soviet states like Kazakhstan implies that it's at least plausible that a majority of Belarusians oppose what's happening in Ukraine. And, well, this makes sense. Even if they're friendly with Russia, other post-Soviet states worry that, if Putin decided to invade Ukraine just because it used to be part of Russia, what's stopping them from being next? This is why in 2014...
Exactly, the Baltics, Kazakhstan, they all have to understand that, look, imagine everything would go perfect for Vladimir Putin, right? He will take Ukraine, Belarus, Baltics, he will just take everything he can because the West doesn't do anything. So if you have some brain cells as the leader of the Baltics or Kazakhstan, you fucking understand that this guy is your true fucking enemy, man.
The Russianization of Crimea, Lukashenko,
needs to be stopped.
The same Lukashenko who's parroting Putin's lines about NATO, made a point of delivering his annual speech in Belarusian instead of Russian, declaring, "We are not Russian, we are Belarusians."
Are we showing some
You get the idea. Belarusians don't support Putin's invasion of Ukraine and would probably riot if Lukashenko tried to mobilize. If his words in 2014 are anything to go by, Lukashenko probably doesn't support it either. Which is why Belarusian involvement
maybe Mr. Lukashenko has some
whatever Lukashenko says in public.
Brain cells left.
Similarly, it's also...
But with dictators, it's always, every decision is based on holding power, right? And maybe he knows that if he goes to that war, it's going to be much harder to hold power.
Worth noting that Belarus is still sending copious amounts of ammunition to Russian forces in Donbass. If Belarus was serious about opening up a northern front with Ukraine, it'd be saving its ammo for its own soldiers.
They should mobilize against the Russian border.
While Lukashenko's rhetoric is as hawkish as ever, history suggests he's more bark than bite. And the fact that invasion is so unpopular in Belarus means that a Belarusian invasion of Ukraine still looks unlikely.
That sounds good.
Not impossible. Now, unsurprisingly, the war in Ukraine continues to dominate the news cycle. So if you want to keep up...
I mean, why not though, right? Dude, I go on 9gag sometimes and there's people, can we stop with the Ukraine news? I'm kind of tired of the Ukraine news. It's a fucking war in Europe. It doesn't go away. What do you mean you don't want the news anymore? It's a fucking war. Thousands of people are dying. Fucking hell. Putin wants to take your freedom away. Let's just not talk about it anymore. Come on, man.